This is another opportunity for us to continue from where we left the other day. As usual, we begin with a gem, which goes like constant efforts and frequent mistakes are the stepping stones of genius. Constant efforts, one might say tenacity of purpose, and frequent mistakes are the stepping stones of genius. Any individual who has never made a mistake, has never tried anything, has never made any effort in doing anything, in as much as we constantly make efforts to do something, as human beings we are bound to make mistakes. But as we make the mistakes we make become the stepping stones of growth into maturity. And that is why our brother Albert Hubbard has said this gem: constant efforts are the frequent mistakes, and frequent mistakes, are the stepping stones of genius. I agree with him. I think you do too. So let us not become weary, become disappointed when we make a mistake, because stress will not change our tomorrows. It only will change the joy of our day. Today's topic: lesson planning. We all agree that the importance of a lesson plan to a teacher cannot be overemphasized. Lesson plan, which is the visible guide of the mental preparation of a teacher, is very, very important to the classroom teacher. And so, in looking at the basic tools for instructional planning, we are using instructional as well as lesson planning. The same, or performance planning. Instructional objective or performance objective, when we get to those places, we are using those words interchangeably. So in looking at the basic tools for instructional planning, we will look at the following: goals, outcomes, taxonomies, lesson and unit planning, and sequencing. Any teacher who plans looks at the goals set. It could be national goals. Then we look at the outcomes. When we teach within a period, what are we expecting? Our taxonomies, are we looking at the understanding base or comprehension or application? We will look at that, and that is taxonomy. When we are planning, we look at these. Then we look at our lesson, the day's topic or the unit, and plan towards that. And then we will look at sequencing, the steps that we are going to go through in the period of delivery in the classroom. Educationists believe that these are the static elements of teaching. And even though our mental preparation, we are told, precede action, the planning that we put on paper provides the basis for the dynamic interactive phases of teaching. We are going to go into the classroom. We are going to interact. Interaction is dynamic. And so what is going to provide for us in this interaction with our learners is the planning that we have put on paper, and that is our lesson plan. There are generic features of lesson plan. or a lesson plan. Irrespective of which area a teacher finds himself or herself, it could be social studies, ICT, mathematics, English, etc. These features, or there are features common to all. Let us take, for example, subject. Could be mathematics, could be religious studies or CRS. Class, it can be 1 science 2 or 2 business 1, 2 business 2. The date could be October 5th, 2020. Time could be 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. In that case, the duration is 120 minutes, double period. Class size, my class could be 40 learners or students, and others will be 39 or 25 or thereabouts. Then there's the average age of a class, could be 16 years, 17 years, or 15 years. Then we have the topic. In CRS, it could be prodigal son. In business management, it could be another topic. But when the topic is there, then the teacher finds the topic to be broad. We have the subtopic. And like the example I've given, the fatherhood of God comes under the topic, the prodigal son, which is very broad. And the teacher, concluding that it cannot be taught within 70 minutes, can break that into subtopic. And it is applicable to any other subject area. Then we have the references. Any teacher going to teach has references, those ones from which he has taken material and which he wants his or her students to make reference to. That should follow. So the teacher must put all those things in the lesson plan. And I've given examples there. FK, Opoku FK 2011, Business Management, Concepts, Theories and Principles. It was published in Accra, Whaley Publishing Service, and specifically pages 4 to 7 is where he wants the students to look at. Then the teacher must follow that up with teaching and learning resources. What resources are at the teacher's disposal? During this mental preparation, the teacher has to think about all these and determine appropriate resources to be used. 2 cardboards, for example, or diagrams. These diagrams are showing the levels of management in the example that I have given. An organizational chart to be used in the introductory phase of the lesson delivery. Then this should be followed with the relevant previous knowledge, RPK, your TLMs and whatever you need and you have prepared that you think you are going to use in your teaching. All these must follow in that sequence. A teacher's success or failure of a lesson delivery depends on a larger extent to the objectives that have been set. So we go to the objective setting. You ask yourself, were your objectives or was your objective stated clearly? Were they focused? Was it focused? So we are going to look at this very well. Instructional objective. A well-stated instructional objective should have 4 elements. Elements of a well-structured instructional or performance objective. And this is from David Moore, Classroom Teaching Skills. We have the performance, we have the condition, we have the criterion, and we have the product. And when a teacher is setting an objective, all these 4 must be present. For example, By the end of the lesson, if it were mathematics, for example, by the end of the lesson, the student will be able to construct an isosceles triangle and at least bisect. So when we go on one after the other, construction there is the performance. The condition, the teacher will have to set a condition. Construction, the condition is that in that example, the students are not going to use, or by the use of a protractor, or without the use of it. So he sets a condition, and the criterion is at least to construct 2 or 3 isosceles triangles. The product at the end is the construction. The isosceles triangle that has been constructed becomes the product. You will take them one after the other for students to get this clear. So generally, performance objectives are generally used by employing a verb or verbs that indicate what the learner is to do. Perform, for example, do or produce. Verbs such as match, name, compute, list, assemble, write, circle, classify. These describe observable learner behavior. And that is why always we have been taught that objectives are set in behavior terms or outcomes, which will help the teacher to evaluate or help the teacher to, that is, evaluate learner achievement of the set objectives or the objectives that have been set by the teacher. Let us know that words such as know, understand, analyze, evaluate, appreciate, or comprehend are not action words. They are used in describing the processes of learning and behaving. They are not observable actions. They can be used anyway to specify goals, but not to specify objectives. Example, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to write down verbatim, this is specific, or paraphrase the pillars of faith, that is the hadith, as it is found in Islam. This is very specific. And at the end of the day, the teacher can evaluate whether the student or the learner was able to write verbatim or paraphrase. In setting, therefore, clear objectives, we set them in reference to goals. Goals cannot be achieved easily because they are broad. For example, the student will learn to read and write. This is very broad. We need a specific objectives to indicate and help us that at the end of the day, the child has been able to read or to write. And so we go direct, precise, and clear. That is why the 4 components show above. So we're going to consider them individually. The performance. A well-stated objective must be written in terms of observable learner performance. So as has been stated earlier, performance objectives are very precise statements of what the teacher expects learners to do. Performance, which is the first element we are considering, is outcome related. And that outcome, we will come to it to find that it is the product. That is the outcome, the product. Conditions. We want to elaborate. Condition is the second element in a performance or instructional objective. It is an elaboration or a description of the conditions under which the learner is to perform the expected behavior. The condition referring to the circumstances under which the learner must perform. And generally, conditional elements refer to one, what materials may be used to perform the task that has been assigned the children, or how the performance may be accomplished. For example, is it from memory? Is it going to be from a textbook? Is it going to be from a computer program, a mathematical table? So it should show the time element, the specified time, and then the location of the performance also can come in. Are the children going to do the exercise in the classroom or a gymnasium or a laboratory for science students? These are specifications of the condition under which an activity is going to take place. Let us look at this. With the aid of a named computer program, the program is omitted in that bracket. Students will be, then you continue. With the aid of a mathematical table, students will be. With the aid of a Bible, with reference to Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and then with the aid of the Hadith, write down similarities of Jesus' teaching and Muhammad's teaching on prayer. So you have specified the condition under which they are to do their work. Using a set of compass, construct. That is the condition. The condition is that the students should use a set of compass. So we refer to the conditional component of a performance or instructional objectives as this or that. This or that becomes the given that, given a mathematical set or a set of compass, construct. So this is the given upon which the learner will accomplish something. For example, using a map, trace the second and third missionary journeys of St. Paul. Or from the notes that you have written, write an appraisal of Salat as prescribed by the Quran. These are all conditions set for or given to the learner by which he should perform an activity. Then we have the criterion measure. This is an evaluative measurement. It describes a definition of an acceptable standard of performance. And perhaps it has been very difficult to state this point, but as we go on it will become clear. The criterion measure. At the end of your teaching, my teaching, I should be able to evaluate, to make a judgment, and therefore I should set a criterion upon which my measurement is going to be based after the teaching. So this becomes the standard that is referred to by other authors as criterion measure, level of performance, minimum criterion, or minimum acceptable performance. They all refer to that criterion. So we designate a level which we think is the minimum or the lowest level that we are going to accept, or that is acceptable by you, the teacher, in relationship to the performance of the learner. So for example, you give exercise. You say, okay, in this exercise 70% of a given list. So when you have marked, the least that you are expecting is that your students, the lowest, must score 70. That is the least. Or 10, and you say 9 out of 10. That is the criterion. Anybody who scores below 9 has not performed creditably according to your criterion of measurement. Or without any grammatical or spelling mistakes for English teachers, you give an exercise. And your criterion of measure is that you are not expecting any grammatical or spelling error. Therefore, the criterion measure is the measurement that alerts the learner to the expectation of success. Oh, I'm going to take this exercise and look. The least score that is acceptable is 70 out of 100. So he's alerted that anything less than 70 is not acceptable. In the second example, anything less than 9 out of 10 is not acceptable. If there's any grammatical or spelling error, it's not acceptable. So the student or the learner is alerted that this is going to be the criterion or the point of measurement. Finally, what is the product? I've mentioned it earlier on as the outcome of a performance. And so we say that this is closely related to performance because what learners perform ends in the outcome or the product of the activity. In other words, product is what learners will produce by their actions or behavior. For example, students will identify by underlining the nouns in the given sentences. So at the end of the day, the performance is underlying, but the outcome are the nouns that have been underlined. So the underlying becomes the activity, which is the performance, whereas the outcome becomes the nouns that have been underlined. Therefore, the product is the planned outcome resulting from the instructional process. You, the teacher, you have taken your learners through the process of instruction. At the end of this instruction, what the children take away from the teaching is what is the product referring to. So it is what teachers want learners to produce, or what the teacher wants the learner to be able to do, which is referred to as the product. So in structuring an instructional objective, all the 4 elements must be present. If you look at the example that I gave some weeks ago, you look at it, this is a management class, and the teacher is expecting the student that at the end of the teaching, some activities to be performed. Describe the main levels of management. So there's a description there. Identify 4 types of managers, 6 careers in management, and explain the 3 main roles of managers in their own words without reference to their textbooks. So it must be structured in this flowing sentence, and all the 4 elements are there. The description is performance, because to describe is specific. To identify is very specific. To identify, let me say again, and the identification has to do with the 4 types, the 6 careers, and then they explain. In explanation, we need to get to, if he is explaining, the student to explain 3 main roles of managers, and the condition is that they are doing this in their own words without reference to their textbooks. All the 4 elements. So look at them again and then try to do some exercises yourself in your subject area. Take a jotter or any piece of paper, pick or choose a topic, break it into a subtopic, sit down and write an objective, and then look at the objective and find out whether what you expect the child to do, performance, a verb is there. The condition under which, or the circumstances under which you want the child to perform. Is it with or without a textbook? English. Computer science. Is it with reference to a computer program? That is the condition. Mathematics. Is it with or without the use of a compass or a mathematical table? That is a reference point of the condition. Then you go on and look at it. Because you have set a condition and you have a performance words already, what is the product? What is the end result? In mathematics, is it construction of parallelogram or a triangle? That will become the product of the construction, the activity. So look at your subject areas and see what you can do to help yourself. So the overall purpose of an instructional performance or objectives is to communicate the exact intent of the lesson. Exact, precise. That is why the verbs are very important. So an objective is just one component, I want you to note, in the teaching process of 1 hour or 2 hours. The objectives that have been set, or the objective that has been set, is just a component of a lesson plan. As teachers, we can fail completely even though we may have constructed technical, correct objective. Why? There should be a lack if a teacher fails in that. And there are 2 things here that we must note. The lack of a teaching skill. And that is why we have taken ourselves through methods of teaching and techniques of teaching. A teacher can prepare technically very well, but if the teacher does not add his or her teaching skills, his interpersonal competencies, otherwise referred to as strategies of teaching, there's no way the teacher can achieve the set objectives for the day or for that period of the lesson. And so in conclusion, we are saying that lesson or teaching, we have said some time ago, goes through phases. We have the pre, we have the process when the teaching is going on, and we have the post. But before the teacher can do all these creditably, planning is at the center. If we don't plan, if we do not plan, then we fail to succeed. And that is why after the mental preparation, the visible evidence of the mental preparation becomes necessary, and that is the lesson plan, which is done in a lesson notebook. So planning with special reference to objective setting is very, very crucial, because if we do not set an objective, then we have failed in respect to what we want to achieve. In other words, we will go round because we have not specifically detailed what we want to achieve for the day. So instructional or performance objective in the overall planning of a lesson is very, very important. And in that lesson plan, with the general features, each area of a lesson, irrespective of your area, computer science, mathematics, calls for specific writing of objectives. And the 4 elements are very important, as well as all the others that I have mentioned. Before we leave off, we are calling attention to specification of time. So a teacher's planning has to take into consideration timing, so that the learner's task on time is not wasted. So assuming we have double period of say 140 minutes, 70-70, or 60-60, 120 minutes, the teacher has to sit down and look at timing. You are starting with introduction. What chunk of time are you devoting to the introductory element? Because you have said if you don't have an advanced organizer, a set induction, an arouser to motivate the learner, we will not be able to succeed. But what time element, the chunk of the 120, are you giving for introduction? You put it down. After the introduction, you are going to go to the middle, the process of instruction, before you go to the end. So you are breaking your teaching process into stages or steps. Step 1, what are you planning to do? Is it just definition? Are you just going to explain concepts? So you determine how much time you are going to use for that. You put down there. You go to stage 2. So you break your processes, your phases of teaching into this time, the totality of which will be your 120 minutes. So timing is very important. Finally, one area where students do not take serious is the teacher-learner column of a lesson plan. The title is very straightforward. Teacher-learner. So any activity in the introduction throughout to the end of evaluation that the teacher goes through must be followed immediately by a learner activity. That is why it is interactive. The teacher does this, and the teacher must assume answers for the learner, because the learner is not there when you are preparing your lesson. And you assume a learner can give a wrong answer, so the expected answers can be right or wrong. It's acceptable. And so for today, we are saying that as far as our units are concerned, the last bit of our teaching, of our exercises, is this planning of a lesson. If you don't plan well, you can't teach well. Nobody who has ever planned well has ever been able to be successful in teaching, as far as teachers are concerned in the classroom. If there's anything that we would do, I gave you, probably, if you remember, when you go off campus, you are going to be assessed. So we need to look at the 2 forms, Form A and Form B. When you teach, you are given a record of your performance. It is on one sheet. And then a tabulated mark, 20 columns. The maximum for each column is 5. 5 times 20 is 100. So for each of the columns, objective setting, your appearance, classroom management, your voice, verbal facility, there are 20. You can find them there. So thank you very much for availing yourself that the 2 of us, learner and teacher, can have this opportunity to go through the little that we have been able to go through. If there are any issues that you want to communicate, please feel free. I have said it, and let me repeat, we will have exam. Otherwise, on what basis are you going to be graded? Thank you very much.